even know what to do with a third chance. Another halo to shake loose, galloping into the crossfire. Should I be apologizing? Supposedly what's inside my body is more or less the same as what's inside yours. Here, the river girl clutching her toy whistle. There, the black snake covered in scabs. Follow my neckline. The beginning will start beginning again. I swear on my head and eyes there are moments in every day where if you asked me to leave, I would. Heaven is mostly preposition, up, above, around, and you can live any place that's a place. A failure of courage is still a victory of safety. Bravery pitches its refugee tent at the base of my brain and slowly starves, chipping away like the clay bird bouncing down a well. All night I eat yogurt and eggplant and garlic, water my dead orchids. In what world would any of me seem credible? God's word is a melody, and melody requires repetition. God's word is a melody I sang once and then forgot. This poem slaps. I don't really know how else to start this video besides saying this poem is so freaking good. When I teach poetry to my students, this is one of the poems that I start with. And I'll explain why I do that a little bit later. Before we start, I should just say that there is no definitive explanation, analysis, interpretation of a poem. That's kind of the point. We each bring our own lived experience to a poem, and just like we do with every art form, and that's what makes it so beautiful. It is a collaborative process. All art form, it is what the author wrote, and it's how we see what they wrote. So you may read certain lines differently, you may interpret certain words differently, and that's a good thing. I hope that happens. I just hope that this analysis that I'm about to give helps you to build your own analysis. And more than anything, I hope you disagree with some of the things I'm about to say. So let's talk about kaveh akbar. if you are an avid reader, you probably know Kaveh Akbar from his novel Martyr, which great book. It shot him to stardom, I would say, or at least as much stardom as you can get in the literary world, which probably isn't that much. But, and I think he would agree with this, he is first and foremost a poet. And he is one of my favorites. So much of my own writing is influenced by his poetry. And I was lucky enough to actually meet him like 5-6 years ago. He would not remember me. It was very brief. However, in that interaction, I got the idea that he's just a very genuine person, and that comes through in his writing. I highly recommend both of his full-length collections, Calling a Wolf, and then Pilgrim Bell. And then Martyr is also super good. Kaveh writes a lot about addiction and religion and the balance between hope and despair. And I think all of those ideas are found in the poem that we're about to talk about, I Wouldn't Even Know What to Do with a Third Chance. So let's talk about doubt, because boy is this poem chock full of it. What would you do with a third chance? It's not clear that a third chance is even an option, but hypothetically, if it were, Kaveh Akbar writes it as something holy, another halo, he says. But immediately the narrator, who is not always the same as the poet who writes the poem, but the narrator considers this opportunity as something that he would immediately ruin. Yes, it is a halo, but one he would shake loose galloping into the crossfire. He simply can't help himself from running into danger and putting his life in danger, and by extension disappointing the people around him. I think this can be interpreted as referring to addiction or some other self-destructive behavior. Kaveh Akbar has many poems about addiction and this idea, and his first chapbook, which 5 out of 5, great poems, is titled Portrait of an Alcoholic. So I think that gives us a good idea of where his mind was at while writing this poem. And I just love this idea of shaking loose the halo. He could have said, I gently remove the halo, or I place the halo somewhere else for safekeeping. But no, he shakes it loose like an animal would, like a wild animal would shake loose an unwanted caller. They shake it loose because it feels unnatural. This third chance, this halo, this proximity to holiness feels unnatural. So this third chance is something holy, but we can dive a little bit deeper into that. I don't think that this third chance would be considered a halo if the third chance was coming from like a job or something like that. No, this is a deeply personal poem, and so I think it's fair to assume that this third chance is coming from the people that he loves, his friends, his family. So I think it's really that love and that acceptance that he finds so holy and so uncomfortable. Then he asks, should I be apologizing? Supposedly what's inside my body is more or less what's inside yours. Is this true? The implication here is that we both struggle And if you can overcome these struggles, because you're not the one who needs the third chance, I am, the narrator, I am. You know, if you can move past these struggles, if you can get them under control, shouldn't I be able to do the same thing? The narrator is struggling with addiction, which seems to alienate him from those people who theoretically could give him a third chance. But those are the same people who don't seem to need a third chance or maybe even a second chance to begin with. To drive this feeling of self-doubt even further, he writes the line, "Follow my neckline, the beginning will start beginning again." Follow my neckline, the beginning will start beginning again. It's one, just a great image, but two, it symbolizes that vicious cycle of addiction or any other vicious cycle, because God knows that there are many. It symbolizes any cycle that's so difficult to break out of, whether it be generational trauma, depression, anxiety, or a million other things. And if you've ever struggled with something so cyclical, then I think that you'll resonate with that feeling of defeat. I swear on my head and eyes, there are moments of every day that if you asked me to leave, I would. I swear, if you asked me to leave, I would. The narrator sees that, he's not just hurting himself, he's hurting the others. And, going back to the idea of that halo being the love from his family, I think that that's probably the worst part. Not the self-destruction, but the impact it has on others. But this self-doubt and this feeling of defeat they're not the only feelings in this poem. Constantly, that feeling is contrasted with hope. Supposedly, what's inside me is what's inside you. There's hope in that. There's hope in that connection. He invokes two images here. First, the river girl clutching a toy whistle, and second, a black snake covered in scabs. We have essentially the image of innocence. The young girl playing with a toy near the river, out in nature, just kind of enjoying her life. And that's contrasted with the image of danger, a black snake. So we are both filled with both of these things, so even in his moments of self-defeat, he has hope. But we can go deeper because, oh wow, does this poem have layers. First, let's look at the girl. She's out there because she has freedom. She's not afraid, freedom from fear of something happening. That whistle is not enough to really, it's a toy, right? It's not gonna save her, but she doesn't recognize enough danger in the world to feel like she needs to be saved. When we're young, we don't really understand how much danger is out there. So there is innocence, but there's also ignorance. And if we look at the snake, it's the opposite. The snake is danger. Humans have evolved to fear snakes for a reason, but the snake is not dangerous for no reason. In real life, of course, they're just fulfilling their natural role as predator. It's humans who have mythologized them to be, the epitome of evil. But in reality, the snake only attacks when it is hunting for food or when it feels threatened. And I think that's very important, because in the poem, the snake is covered in scabs. It is dangerous because it has been hurt. So, How does this speak to the poem as a whole? Well, supposedly we all have these aspects within us. We have that innocence coupled with ignorance, and we have that danger, whether to ourselves or others. But hurt people. Like it comes from somewhere, and it's usually as a self-defense mechanism. There is hope that because of this, because of the similarities between us, there is hope in the fact that maybe this means that we can help each other, or at the very least understand each other. There is hope that if you've been able to find a balance between these feelings inside of you, then maybe the narrator can too. The narrator continues this strain of hope in one of my favorite lines of the poem, although I feel like I could probably say that about most of the lines of the poem, but this is top 3. Heaven is mostly preposition, up, above, around, and you can live any place that's a place. If you don't think that's a good line, I urge you to reconsider. This is how we speak of heaven. It's all around us, it's up above, in the clouds. And if that's true, all these prepositions are places, and you can live any place that's a place. You can make this heaven. The place that you are right now, this world that we live in right now, we could make it heaven. It's a beautiful thought, but almost immediately that doubt starts to creep back in. You could make here heaven, but that's easier said than done. It takes confronting your fears, confronting your trauma. It takes changing your habits and risking the life that you have for a future that is uncertain. He writes, "A failure of courage is still a victory of safety. Bravery pitches its refugee tent at the back of my neck and slowly starves, chipping away like a clay bird bouncing down a well." I do not have the will to change, the narrator says. When that hope comes, it comes as a refugee, and it's already starving. It's already running from something. It's already chipping away. One of the problems I have personally is when a depressive episode comes, it just feels so comfortable. It happens so often that it's easy for my mind to convince me that that is where I'm supposed to be. And this idea of trying to get out of it, seems more difficult than just the feeling of depression itself. So it's, so easy to slide back into that depressive state. And the narrator does. I eat yogurt and eggplant every night. I water my dead orchids. In what world would any of me seem credible? He's not making full meals. This is what we would call a depression meal, probably. And he's not even keeping his plants alive. How is he expected to keep himself alive? Why would anyone waste a third chance on him? God's word is a melody, and melody requires repetition. God's word is a melody I sang once and then forgot. Those lines stay with me for weeks every time I read this poem. I mean, they probably never really go away. Is it my favorite ending to a poem? Probably. Remember the beginning of this poem, that third chance being a halo, being something holy. In the middle of the poem, we talk about heaven and how it could be all around us. But in order to live in heaven, in order to live that holiness, however you want to define holiness, I'm not religious. I don't define it as some, specific God or anything. But however you want to define it, in order to get there, it takes repetition. You need to break out of the cycle and create new ones, beneficial ones. But he has sang God's word only once and then forgets the melody altogether. He's not going to break the cycle. He's not going to escape addiction, escape depression. It's going to consume him. So, this poem does not really end on a positive note. Unless, and hear me out, he's wrong. Maybe there is repetition. Someone, hypothetically, is giving him a third chance. Or at least there's enough potential for a third chance that it's worth considering. It's worth considering what he would do with it. That means that there have been 2 chances prior. He has tried once, he has tried a second time. Maybe he will try a third time. And maybe that melody is being sung without him even realizing it. It just might be being sung by other people. And maybe that's what he needs to kind of kickstart and start trying to take steps outside of the cycle. And in a meta way, the poem does end with repetition. God's word is a melody. God's word is a melody. He says it twice, and he's had 2 chances. Maybe there will be a third chance. And that's, enough for the melody to take hold. Did Kaveh Akbar intend all of that when he wrote this poem? Fuck if I know. But it is in there. And that's not nothing. So this poem, it deals with hope and it deals with self-doubt, and maybe it does have a defeatist ending. So why did I choose it for the first poem on this channel? Why do I teach it so early on and so often with my students? Because more than self-doubt, more than hope, I think this poem is about compassion. In the poem, you and I are in control. We have the ability to give that third chance. Addiction is a complicated topic, obviously, and if you know someone who struggles with it, I would urge you to obviously do what you can to help them, but make sure that you protect yourself and protect your peace as well. But, that's on an individual level. But on a societal level, I kind of think we're doing a shit job with it. Addiction is a disease, and, people treat it as a personal failing, but it's not. And we don't even have to be talking about addiction. It's just so fucking hard to exist right now in the world that we all live in. And there are so few safety nets to help catch us in most parts of the world. There's a few that are solid, relatively solid, but I think there's no perfect country, no perfect society. We could all do better. Addiction is cyclical and it's often hereditary, and people often fall into drug abuse as a coping mechanism. You may believe that it could never happen to you, and I obviously hope it never does. But ask yourself this: How many missed paychecks are you from losing your house or losing your apartment? How big of a medical emergency would it take for you to be in insurmountable debt? Of course, if you're in a place with universal health care, fucking good for you. No, genuinely good for you. But what I'm saying is that, we are closer to poverty, we are closer to living on the streets and, easily falling into drug abuse as a coping mechanism. We are far closer to that than we are to, being the richest person in the world, or not even the richest, just well off. And it shouldn't take experiencing those travesties to have empathy for them. Even though, to my knowledge, none of my students are experiencing what Kaveh Akbar has experienced, I still hope that by reading this poem, they can form a connection with the narrator, and they can do so in a way that helps build empathy. At the very least, we have all felt self-doubt, we have all felt defeated, but we all also have the choice to be there for others. And as a society, we have the choice to give people the third, fourth, fifth chance, however many chances it takes for them to get out of that cycle and live a good life. The life they deserve to live simply for being human. I don't believe that anyone is too far gone to change, to break out of the cycles that traumatize us and hold us back. We have all felt this self-doubt in our lives, and we often cope with it through isolation or addiction, when in reality, we need community. The cycle continues, but because it's a cycle, that means there's no definitive beginning and ending. And that means that we can choose when it ends. We can step outside the cycle. It's not easy, of course. It's probably the hardest thing that you can do. But it starts with us just having more compassion for each other, and then others will have more compassion for you, and then hopefully we build a society that is rooted in compassion. It takes work. It requires us to reconcile all these competing ideas within us, but heaven, or at least a few steps closer to heaven, is just a place. And you can live anywhere that's a place. Thank you for watching. Like and subscribe if you want to. I'm not your mom. Do whatever you want. But be nice to each other.